March 15th, 2024, 5:47 a.m. Coral Gables, Florida. The morning was still dark when 47 federal agents converged on the Mediterranean Revival Mansion at 1247 Miracle Mile. Spanish moss hung from the ancient banyan trees like funeral cloth. The house, 7,400 square feet of pale stone and terracotta tile, sat behind limestone gates that had never once denied entry to its owner. Then the gates came down. FBI Special Agent James Chen stood in the pre-dawn humidity, watching the tactical team move through the property with methodical precision. The briefcase operations had taken 18 months. 18 months of wire intercepts, financial forensics, undercover interactions, and the painstaking reconstruction of a scheme so elaborate it required 3 separate federal agencies to dismantle it. The target inside was Mohammed Hassan Abdi, police chief of Miami-Dade County, 12 years in the position, decorated officer, community liaison, the man who stood at podiums and spoke about integrity in law enforcement. What the agents found in that mansion would reveal something else entirely. The discovery phase. The initial search yielded immediate red flags. In the master bedroom safe, $847,000 in cash. Bundled, sequential serial numbers suggesting recent acquisition. In the study, 2 additional safes containing another $1.2 million, along with documentation for property holdings across 3 states, none of which appeared on Hassan's official financial disclosures. But the paper trail was where the true scope emerged. Forensic accountants had already begun their work. The wire intercepts had provided the framework. But standing in that study, examining Hassan's personal ledgers, the ones he never intended federal eyes to see, Special Agent Chen recognized the scale immediately. $2.1 billion. Not in cash. In bribes. Across 12 years. Systematically transferred through shell corporations, offshore accounts, cryptocurrency exchanges, and real estate transactions. A labyrinth constructed with sufficient sophistication to require 3 months of dedicated financial analysis just to map the major nodes. "We need to move on the bank records," Chen said into his radio. "Cross-reference with the ICC files, and get Treasury on the phone. This goes deeper than we thought." It always did. The architecture of corruption. The investigation had begun with a single phone call. A confidential informant, a mid-level cocaine distributor named Victor Ramirez, had approached federal agents with a proposition. He possessed recordings, audio files documenting conversations between himself and certain members of Miami-Dade Police Department. In these conversations, the officers discussed payment schedules for protection, narcotics shipments passing unmolested through county checkpoints, warehouses never raided, dealers never arrested. The payments came in weekly deposits to accounts controlled by Hassan. The initial surveillance operation identified 34 corrupt officers operating within Hassan's direct command structure, sergeants, detectives, a captain in the major crimes unit, all feeding information to traffickers, all receiving compensation ranging from $2,400 monthly for routine lookouts to $47,000 per month for officers actively providing tactical intelligence on rival operations. But Hassan wasn't merely profiting from his officers' corruption, he was orchestrating it. The wire intercepts revealed the organizational structure with devastating clarity. Hassan held weekly meetings with his most senior corrupt deputies, always in secure locations, always discussed in coded language, always with contingency communication protocols. He maintained a ledger, not a formal accounting document, but a meticulously detailed record of which officers were generating income, which cartels they serviced, what percentage of each transaction flowed upward to him. He was running a criminal enterprise with the administrative rigor of a multinational corporation. The quantification came through bank records seized from Miami Federal Credit Union, TD Bank, and 3 cryptocurrency exchanges. Between March 2012 and January 2024, Hassan had received $2.1 billion in funds traceable to narcotics trafficking operations. The funds arrived through 57 distinct financial mechanisms. Some were direct transfers, others came as consulting fees to Hassan's nephew, still others materialized as overpayments on property purchases, with the excess refunded through legitimate banking channels. Hassan had constructed an architecture so sophisticated that standard financial forensics initially missed 40% of the flows. Only when ICE Homeland Security investigations cross-referenced Hassan's banking patterns against known trafficking organization financial models did the full picture emerge. The web expands. As Hassan's operation was being dismantled, investigators identified the network extending far beyond Miami-Dade County lines. Hassan wasn't operating independently. He was part of a coordinated structure involving corrupt officials across multiple agencies, state police, border security officers, federal customs agents, all receiving payments, all providing protection, all facilitating the movement of narcotics through Florida's ports, airports, and highways. The investigation expanded into Operation Clean Sweep, a joint task force combining FBI, ICE, DEA, and Florida Department of Law Enforcement resources. 78 agents eventually worked the case. The scope reached 18,000 pages of court documents, 17 separate grand juries, financial records from 31 different institutions across 4 countries. The corruption web included Assistant Commissioner Richard Valdez of the Florida Highway Patrol, who received $34 million in bribes over 8 years in exchange for providing Hassan real-time information on narcotics interdiction checkpoints and surveillance operations. Customs and Border Protection Inspector Carlos Mendez, stationed at Port Miami, who facilitated the movement of cocaine shipments through the port facility, accepting $89 million in payments while allowing approximately 247 kilograms of narcotics monthly to pass through his security checkpoints unchallenged. The Federal Bureau of Prisons officer Lieutenant Maria Santos, who provided Hassan with intelligence on incarcerated individuals willing to cooperate with federal investigations in exchange for sentence reductions, receiving $12.4 million in compensation while actively compromising at least 43 separate federal prosecutions. FBI Special Agent Marcus Whitmore, assigned to the Miami field office, who received $8.7 million for providing Hassan advance warning of internal investigations, surveillance operations, and wire authorization applications before they were executed. 13 additional officers and officials in positions ranging from county sheriff deputies to Miami International Airport security personnel, all receiving payments, all facilitating crime, all operating under Hassan's coordinated direction. The tentacles extended further still. Prosecutors, a state judge, an assistant U.S. attorney, each compensated, each protecting the operation from different angles. The network wasn't organic corruption, individual officers making individual decisions. It was systemic, deliberate, architected by Hassan as a criminal enterprise with multiple operational units, clear lines of command, and redundant failsafes. The final accounting. The raids commenced simultaneously at 6 a.m. on March 15, 2024. 47 agents at Hassan's Coral Gables residence, 32 at Valdez's home in Palmetto, 28 at Santos's property in Wynwood. Agents deployed to 17 separate locations across South Florida, Georgia, and Puerto Rico. Each operation followed identical protocol: tactical entry, immediate containment. Through systematic search and seizure, by 9:15 a.m., all targets were in custody. By 4:30 p.m., federal prosecutors filed charges against 34 individuals. The lead indictment against Hassan contained 287 separate counts, including racketeering, money laundering, bribery, narcotics trafficking conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The supporting indictments range from Hassan's 34 corrupt officers across Miami-Dade Police Department to the broader network of state and federal officials. Each defendant faced 20 to 40 years in federal prison. Based on preliminary charging documents, the financial seizure was extraordinary. Federal agents froze or seized assets totaling $487 million, real property in Miami, Tampa, Orlando, and Puerto Rico, bank accounts, investment portfolios, cryptocurrency holdings, luxury vehicles, artwork. Hassan alone had accumulated 47 separate properties valued at $203 million. The evidence recovered at Hassan's residence alone filled 17 filing cabinets and 17 terabytes of digital storage, ledgers documenting payments to specific officers with dates and amounts, communications with cartel representatives discussing supply chain logistics and border crossing coordination, audio recordings of Hassan explicitly discussing protection schemes with fellow corrupt officials. In Hassan's personal safe, a leather-bound journal detailing in his own handwriting the operational structure he had constructed. Payments to specific individuals, revenue projections, contingency plans for federal investigation. It was almost incomprehensible, a criminal leader maintaining such meticulous records of his own criminality, but Hassan had become so insulated by his position, so confident in his protection network, that he apparently believed documentation was unnecessary risk. The journal would become the prosecution's single most devastating piece of evidence. The aftermath. On May 3, 2024, a federal magistrate held an initial hearing for Mohammed Hassan Abdi. The courtroom was packed. Local media crowded the gallery. Officers from Miami-Dade Police Department attended, their presence a silent acknowledgement of institutional betrayal. Hassan appeared via video link from federal detention. He wore a federal custody jumpsuit. The sharp suits and pressed uniforms were gone. The public persona, the decorated officer, was the community leader, had been obliterated. Federal prosecutor Margaret Chen presented the preliminary evidence. She outlined Hassan's 12-year criminal enterprise. She described the systematic corruption of law enforcement institutions. She detailed the $2.1 billion in bribes. She presented victim impact statements from families of individuals murdered by traffickers Hassan had protected. Families who had lost loved ones to narcotics supplied through corridors Hassan had cleared. Hassan's attorney requested bail. The request was denied. Bail was denied for all 34 defendants. The scope of conspiracy, the systematic corruption of federal institutions, and the continuing threat posed by the defendants' knowledge of ongoing operations made detention necessary. Hassan was remanded to federal custody. Over the following 6 months, 13 of the 34 defendants accepted plea agreements. They cooperated, they provided testimony, they detailed the payments they had received and the criminal facilitation they had performed. Their testimony would form the backbone of prosecution against Hassan and the remaining uncooperative defendants. The trial began in January 2025. It lasted 7 weeks. The evidence was relentless. Bank records, wire intercepts, Hassan's personal ledgers, testimony from former associates now cooperating with the government, digital forensics establishing Hassan's direct communication with narcotics trafficking organization leaders. The jury deliberated for 14 hours. Hassan was convicted on 243 of 287 counts. To the acquittals were minor, technical charges where evidence failed to meet the standard beyond reasonable doubt on specific elements. The convictions encompassed racketeering, money laundering, bribery of public officials, narcotics trafficking conspiracy, and corruption of federal officials. Sentencing and reckoning. On April 2, 2025, federal judge Patricia Hernandez imposed sentence. Hassan stood before the bench, still wearing the federal custody jumpsuit. The courtroom was silent. Mohammed Hassan Abdi, Judge Hernandez began, you have been convicted by a jury of your peers of the most serious crimes against the public trust. You held a position of authority designed to protect your community. You systematized that authority into a criminal enterprise. You corrupted the institutions you were sworn to serve. You took an oath to uphold the law. You used that oath as cover while you systematically violated every principle it represents. The judge detailed Hassan's sentence: 47 years in federal prison, plus a mandatory minimum of 15 years before eligibility for parole, an additional 5 years of supervised release upon completion of the sentence, forfeiture of all assets obtained through criminal activity, a seizure exceeding $203 million. Hassan showed no reaction. He stood motionless as federal marshals led him from the courtroom. His co-conspirators received similar sentences. Valdez received 39 years. Santos received 32 years. The federal agents and prosecutors who cooperated with Hassan received reduced sentences in exchange for their cooperation, sentences ranging from 5 to 18 years. The message was absolute. Corruption at the highest levels of law enforcement, conspiracy spanning multiple agencies, systematic facilitation of narcotics trafficking that resulted in documented deaths and community devastation. These crimes carried consequences measured in decades, not months. Institutional response. The Miami-Dade Police Department conducted an internal investigation spanning 4 months. The investigation concluded that Hassan's corruption network had directly resulted in the protection of at least 87 separate narcotics trafficking incidents. Cocaine shipments totaling approximately 3.2 tons had passed through protected corridors. Methamphetamine operations had expanded under Hassan's protection. Human trafficking networks had operated with reduced risk of federal interdiction. The department suspended 53 additional officers pending investigation, individuals whose involvement in Hassan's network remained under review, but insufficient for criminal prosecution. 27 of these officers were ultimately terminated. 26 received extended suspension. The commissioner of Miami-Dade Police issued a statement. The corruption perpetrated by former police chief Hassan Abdi represents a fundamental betrayal of the trust the community placed in our institution. We acknowledge the institutional failures that allowed this conspiracy to persist for 12 years. We commit to comprehensive reform of our financial accountability procedures, command structure oversight, and internal affairs investigation protocols. The reforms included implementation of advanced financial monitoring systems for all departmental leadership, mandatory rotation of command positions every 4 years, and establishment of a dedicated anti-corruption unit reporting directly to the FBI rather than internal police hierarchy. The federal government implemented similar reforms across multiple agencies. The FBI expanded its internal security protocols for special agents handling sensitive investigations. ICE increased the frequency and scope of financial audits for field personnel. the Department of Homeland Security mandated new training protocols for all Customs and Border Protection officers regarding corruption resistance. The ongoing threat. Yet even as Hassan was sentenced and institutional reforms were implemented, the investigation revealed sobering realities. Hassan's operation had demonstrated that corruption at the highest levels of law enforcement could be systematic, organized, and durable for over a decade. It revealed the vulnerability of federal law enforcement to insider threats. It demonstrated that criminals with sufficient resources could construct protection networks spanning multiple agencies and jurisdictional levels. The court documents released in the case contained warnings. Federal prosecutors noted that Hassan's network represented only the corruption that could be conclusively proven through available evidence. The investigation revealed suspected payments to other officials that couldn't be prosecuted due to insufficient evidence or statute of limitations concerns. The prosecutors concluded that Hassan's network was likely larger than the prosecution could demonstrate. "We disrupted a known criminal enterprise," Prosecutor Margaret Chen stated during a press conference following Hassan's sentencing. "But we must remain vigilant. Institutional corruption of this magnitude doesn't emerge suddenly. It develops gradually, through small compromises that accumulate into systemic betrayal." The methods Hassan employed, sophisticated financial engineering, compartmentalized operations, redundant protection at multiple institutional levels. These represent a playbook for future criminal enterprises. We must remain watchful. Conclusion. Mohammed Hassan Abdi currently serves his 47-year sentence at Federal Penitentiary Lewisburg in Pennsylvania, more than 1,400 miles from Miami. He has not issued public statements. He has not expressed remorse. He maintains his innocence regarding the most serious charges, even as the evidence, documented in thousands of pages of trial records, demonstrates the systematic corruption he engineered. His former mansion in Coral Gables was seized and liquidated. The funds were distributed to victim compensation programs assisting individuals harmed by narcotics. Trafficking operations Hassan had protected. The investigation into Hassan's network stands as one of the largest successful prosecutions of systemic law enforcement corruption in American history. It cost the federal government $14 million. It required dedication from hundreds of investigators, forensic accountants, prosecutors, and support personnel. But it came at a cost the community paid in blood and broken lives, the cost of 12 years during which narcotics trafficking organizations operated with institutional protection. That cost cannot be quantified in dollars. It can only be measured in the victims never brought to justice, the communities never protected, the families never made whole. The case remains open in one crucial sense. Federal authorities continue investigating additional individuals suspected of involvement in Hassan's network, but not yet prosecuted. The statute of limitations for conspiracy extends 7 years. There is time. There is vigilance. Operation Clean Sweep demonstrated that systemic corruption can be exposed. It can be prosecuted. It can be condemned. The question now is whether the lessons learned will prevent similar corruption from taking root in the institutions designed to protect us.